What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, if you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living in the rock, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get in to another mafia topic. And over the last 2 or 3 months, occasionally we will get into mob farm teams. We've talked about the likes of Anthony Aiello, the Bath Avenue crew, Paul Ragusa, and other mob farm teams. Today, we are going to get into arguably the most violent of them all. We're going to talk about the leader of one of those crews today. At one point in New York, and still to this day, regardless of his status, Dino Calabro would be called upon as one of the most violent young individuals who killed multiple people. We're going to get into his rise into the Colombo crime family, ultimately becoming a captain. The story of Big Dino Calabro. Next on Sit Down Shorts. Dino Calabro was born in 1967 in Castellammare del Golfo, Sicily. He would actually come up after his family moved to New York in his young years. And according to people that knew Dino Calabro, he would struggle in school due to not being able to totally master the English language. And he would quickly take to the streets of Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, a place where many mobsters came up, as we've talked about time and time and time again. Now, for Dino Calabro, his journey to the mob was all too familiar. In talking about people like Paul Ragusa, Anthony Aiello, for Dino Calabro, it was a similar connection to the mafia. His family, in fact, most of his cousins and people that were close to him, family-wise, were in the mafia. It was actually alleged by one underworld source that he was connected to a lot of made men, particularly in the Bonanno crime family, as most of the Sicilian-born young associates were. So for Dino Calabro, the journey to the mafia was probably all too familiar. In fact, at one point down the road, he would say, quote, "I seen older guys with dress suits on and cars and jewelry in the middle of the day, and that was just what I wanted to do. I didn't want to work. That's the kind of life I wanted." So for him, the path to crime was all too familiar. He would eventually meet an individual called John Parlagreco. Now, Parlagreco's brother Mario was actually connected in the Colombo crime family. He was an associate of feared Colombo crime family member Greg the Grim Reaper Scarpa. And for Dino Calabro, he would pal around Parlagreco around the Wimpy Boys Social Club in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. In the 80s, Dino Calabro would get jammed up, stealing cars, and would get hit with a burglary beef and would be sentenced to 1.5 to 5 years in state prison. He would come home in the mid to late 80s and slot in right where he belonged. He would start palling around again with Parlagreca, and Dino Calabro would make his foray into crime. He would start also hanging around an Irish-Italian individual named Tommy McLaughlin. Now, on McLaughlin's one side was his Italian family. His cousin was Colombo mobster Thomas Tommy Shots Gioeli. Now, Gioeli was coming up and was about 14 years older than Dino Calabro, but he would be introduced through McLaughlin, Dino Calabro, to Tommy Shots. Now, Tommy Shots took a quick liking to Dino Calabro, and he basically started mentoring a young Calabro. Calabro assembled a crew, not only with Tommy McLaughlin, but an individual called Anthony Basil, who was connected to the Bonanno crime family, a person called Richie Graves, and a person called John Bonanza, who had connections to mobsters as well. He was a violent individual. They would create a co-op called the Bay Parkway Boys, and they would operate off of Bay Parkway in Brooklyn. Now, for Tommy Shots, he would quickly realize that Dino Calabro was not only a very violent individual and someone that he could call upon to take care of beatings and other things, but he was also someone that was very willing to earn. In fact, Dino Calabro quickly was being schooled in controlling poker machines. That was something that Tommy Schatz was very big on. He at one point controlled a vast amount of poker machines, not only in Brooklyn, but in Long Island. Tommy Schatz was also schooling Calabro on how to stick up banks, stores, drug dealers, all sorts of different places in and around Brooklyn and Long Island. He would also call upon Calabro to take care of people. In one instance, Tommy Schatz would instruct Dino Calabro to beat up an individual called Joe the Banker Monty. And according to Tommy Schatz, he wanted Monty beaten up because, quote, he was a dirty old man that needed to be taken care of. Now, to this day, Dino Calabro has no idea why he was told to beat up Joe Monty, but he did it. And for Tommy Schatz, this was all he needed to know. For long periods of time, he would know that Dino Calabro could be trusted, and he was an up-and-comer in the Colombo crime family. For Dino Calabro, this would also mean that he could start earning and making a lot of money. For him, he would start sticking up anything he could get his hands on, as I said, from banks to drug dealers to different stores. One of his favorite things to jump on was fur shops, including multiple fur shops on Long Island. In one instance, one of Dino Calabro's most successful robberies was at a fur shop in Syosset, Long Island. He and his cohorts would make away with about 150 high-end furs valued at close to $1 million. Now, for Dino Calabro, this was a big score, and this was something that he could kick up to his buddy, Tommy Schatz. Also around this time, Dino Calabro started dating a woman called Andrea, who actually had family members that were connected very high in the Bonanno crime family. At one point, it was found out that Dino Calabro actually assaulted his girlfriend, and at one point was actually stabbed in 1991 by members of the Bonanno crime family. Certain people started to talk a little bit, and eventually that was smoothed over. He would subsequently marry Andrea. Now, this first store takeover was helpful to pay for his wedding. For Dino Calabro, things were working out well, but certain members of his crew were starting to make problems with other farm teams in Brooklyn. One of the members of the crew of the Bay Parkway Boys was a person called O.J. Anab. Now, Anab started to have a beef with an individual called Frank Marusa. Now, Marusa was nicknamed Chestnut. He and Enab started getting beefs with each other. And at one point, Enab would actually assault Marusa. He would beat him with a baseball bat. Eventually, Marusa decides enough with this fucking guy. He would spot Enab sitting in a car in Brooklyn and would murder him on the spot. The Bay Parkway Boys would get wind of this and quickly go to their kind of boss in a way, Tommy Schatz. Tommy Schatz would say that, look, we got to take care of this smart. He knew that the Bath Avenue crew was loosely associated with Anthony Spiro. So Joely would give the okay to kill Frank Marusa. Now, for Dino Calabro, this was something he needed to do, and they needed to do it smartly. On June 12th, 1991, they would stalk Frank Chestnut Marusa to the area of 19th Avenue near 86th Street in Brooklyn. At that point, the individuals that were a part of the Bay Parkway Boys would kill Chestnut. Now, again, he had killed a member of their crew, and this was definitely in terms of gang underworld things. This was something that needed to be taken care of. For Tommy Schatz, he was proud. His man Calabro was taking care of things in the streets. Now, this would not end. According to underworld sources that I talked to, they would say that after the killing of Chestnut, certain members of the Bath Avenue crew wanted to not only take out members of Calabro's crew, but one of the members, Little Dino Saraceno, who was very close with Dino Calabro. At one point, Calabro and his cohorts were mentioned as saying that they were going to take out the entire body of the Bath Avenue crew, including members like Jimmy Calandra and people like that. Now, that never happened, but ultimately this was all smoothed over, and Dino Calabro kind of moved on. Now, he would continue being schooled by Tommy Schatz. He would drive for Tommy Schatz. He was collecting loans. And he eventually would start becoming part of what was known as the Colombo War. As we know, in the early 90s, the Vic Orena faction started warring with the Carmine Persco faction. Now, for Tommy Schatz and Dino Calabro, they would obviously side with Greg Scarpa and the Carmine Persco faction. And at one point, Dino Calabro would take part in a murder. He was called upon by Tommy Schatz to take care of an individual called John Minerva. Now, John Minerva at one point was part of the Russo group in the Carmine Persco faction, but Minerva would at one point owe Jojo Russo some money and decide to switch sides. That was a big problem for Minerva. He would be killed in Long Island by Dino Calabro and his people. Now, the Colombo brass of the family was very happy. Minerva was a big target, and Dino Calabro could walk around the streets of Brooklyn with his head held high, knowing that he took out a very high-end individual. Now, for Dino Calabro, he would also have to start taking care of people in his crew. And look, the ruthlessness of Dino Calabro was very much on Front Street. He was not killing just people that he was called upon to kill. At one point, one of his most close associates, Richie Graves, is starting to act weird, subversive. He starts not kicking up certain money to Tommy Schatz, and that was a big problem for Dino Calabro. Tommy Schatz realized Dino Calabro not only was a killer, an earner, but he was a leader. And a lot of the kids in the Bay Parkway Boys looked at Dino as a leader. Dino needed to take out the trash. Richie Graves would start telling people, particularly Dino, that he wanted to get out of the business and move to Arizona and open up restaurants. And they also started to realize maybe this guy's a cooperator. And at one point, there was a rumor going around that Dino Calabro was approached by Richie Graves, who mentioned to Dino that, quote, he wanted to have a threesome with Dino Calabro and his girlfriend, and that Dino worried that Graves may have been a bisexual. At one point, that was just enough for Dino Calabro. This would mean he would have to take out Richie Graves. He, alongside Little Dino Saraceno, would shoot Richard Graves. And at one point, Richard Graves was not killed. And at that point, Saraceno and Dino Calabro would choke Richard Graves to death. At one point during the cleanup of Richard Graves, Calabro would bring along his brother, Anthony Nooch Calabro, during the burial. And at one point in a wiretap, Nooch Calabro would talk about the fact that he hated Graves so much that he actually kicked Graves in his skull as he was being buried. And he would talk about this on a wiretap years later. So again, Calabro was taking out people close to him, people not close to him. He was very much rising in the Colombo crime family. Now, Richard Graves would also have to, in his death, have to deal with the fact that after the murder of Graves, Dino Calabro was approached by Graves' girlfriend asking where the hell he was and if Dino had seen him. Dino would then supposedly seduce Graves' ex-girlfriend just days after murdering her boyfriend and allegedly have sex with her. So he was also starting to create this kind of thing. At one point, it was very well known that Dino Calabro was having sex with multiple individuals' girlfriends after he killed them. That was just something that he ended up doing. Now, during the mid-90s, there was starting to become some smooth waters for the Colombo crime family. For them, they were lucky because Mush Russo started kind of taking over, started bringing the family into some good waters. And a lot of that had to do with not only Mush Russo, but Tommy Schatz. He would act very openly as kind of a peacekeeper between not only Mush Russo, but one of the other members of the Arena faction, Joe Waverly Cacase. Now, Joe Waverly also acted as a peacekeeper, and these guys kind of took the Colombo family in the mid-90s to pretty calm states. So that was good news for them. Now, for Cacase, he would call upon the members of Tommy Schatz's crew and mentees to kind of take care of a problem that he had. During 1996, Joe Waverly had an ex-wife. a woman called Kim Kenna. Now, Kim Kenna had not only dated and married Waverly, but at one point was married to an individual called Enrico Carini, who was a mobster as well. She would divorce at one point, get case, and start dating an individual called Ralph Doles, seen here on the left. Now, Doles was a housing authority police officer and was, for one point, very lauded. In his 4.5 years of service, the powers that be would actually call him a great cop. He was very well known in the community. He would always pal around and was very close with the community, including kids and things of that nature. He was lauded as a gentle giant and a very good cop, according to the New York Housing Authority. Now, Joe Waverly was, quote, embarrassed that Kim Kenna was dating and would ultimately marry Ralph Doles. He would go to Tommy Schatz at one point and kind of say, hey, we need something taken care of. Calabro would go see him at his social club on Avenue X in Brooklyn. At that point, allegedly, Case would order them to take out Ralph Doles. Now, he would tell Calabro that Ralph Doles was, quote, some Mexican kid who mouthed off to him at a social club. He did not tell them that Ralph Doles was a cop. And that would be obviously something that they probably, if they knew, would not have did what they did. On the late hours of August 25th, 1997, in front of 2107 East 19th Street, just off Avenue U in Brooklyn, Ralph Doles approached his home after a shift as a police officer. At that point, he walked towards the door of his home when two individuals, quote, said something to him along the lines of, hey, what's up? He responded, what's up? At that point, two individuals shot him to death. Dino Calabro would say years later that he, quote, unloaded his entire clip on Ralph Doles. At that point, they would make off and get into a crash car. They would leave the scene, and that was that. They would find out the next day after a long slumber that Ralph Doles was actually a cop. And at one point, Calabro was furious at the fact that he was not told he was a cop. He would go to the home of Tommy Schatz in Long Island, and they would actually consider at one point killing Joe Waverly for this little stunt. But again, they never took care of that piece of work. Now, he would be called upon, Dino Calabro, to take care of another big hit in 1999. He would be called upon to take care of a very high-end individual. And if you know anything about the Colombo crime family, you know who Wild Bill Cutolo is. Around the late 90s, the boss of the family, Carmine Persico, had obviously given orders that his son, Little Alley Boy Persico, take over the family. They had worried that Bill Cutolo, who was very respected in the Colombo family, was going to try to take over. They would order the murder. Now, during this time, Little Dino Saracino and Big Dino Calabro were really the point men for this, alongside Tommy Schatz. Tommy Schatz would pick up Wild Bill Cutolo in 1999 and drive him to the home of Little Dino Saracino, where Little Alley Boy would be waiting, and they would have, quote, a sit down. At that point, Wild Bill Cutolo goes into the basement, and that's where he would find Little Dino and Big Dino. They would kill, allegedly, Wild Bill Cutolo. Now, for that piece of work, Calabro would be made in 2000, and Joe Waverly would be called upon once Little Alley Boy goes away as the new acting boss of the Colombo crime family. So from Castellamare del Golfo to being made, Big Dino was made into a member of the Colombo crime family. Once Waverly is actually indicted in 2003, Tommy Schatz would be the new street boss of the Colombo crime family. And for them, the feds, they would have a lot of trouble getting Tommy Schatz off the street. He would also bring upon some relative quiet to the wild Colombo crime family. They had trouble making a case against him because he was so adept at not being caught on wiretap. He would hold meetings at a bowling alley in Long Island that was very loud, and he was someone that was very elusive to the feds. And for long periods of time, him and Calabro were able to operate. Eventually, for Dino Calabro, he would become a captain. He would make a lot of money through his own crew. He would have multiple members in his crew, including an individual called Ralph Scopo Jr., who, like members of his family, including his father, were very connected in not only different unions, but had huge loan sharking businesses. And for Dino Calabro, he would make a lot of money, not only through unions, but through sports betting, loan sharking. He had a wide network, Dino Calabro, of people in the families that were not only associates, but made members. They were kicking up to him, and he was indeed kicking up to the powers that be, including his mentor, Tommy Schatz. By 2008, though, members of the Colombo crime family like Dino Calabro started to realize that the feds were closing in on him. In one wiretapped conversation, he would realize that the feds were closing in. He would tell multiple members that, hey, were you going to send me stuff when I go away? Were you going to take care of me? All sorts of things. They kind of realized the writing was on the wall, and that eventually they killed a cop at one point. Eventually, the feds were not going to stop looking for them. In June of 2008, Tommy Schatz would be arrested, and this would be what he would be caught in, and he would get a lot of shit from the newspapers for how he was dressed at that point. Also arrested during that point in a 17-count indictment was Big Dino Calabro. Now, by the end of 2008, Calabro really had a question on his mind. What was he going to do? Now, for Tommy Schatz was an old school gangster. He was never going to cooperate. But Big Dino Calabro started hearing it from certain members inside MDC. They started wondering, would he do it? Would he do it? And exactly he did. He was facing some very heavy charges. He was facing murder charges. He was facing high-end racketeering charges. He had to realize that for himself, he was probably going to get a very long prison sentence. Remember, at one point, he had killed a cop, for God's sakes, and he was probably going to have to face that. Eventually, in September of 2008, one of the members of his crew, Joseph Joey Caves Compatiello, would cooperate. He would give them not only multiple murders, but he would cave on one of his friends, Big Dino Calabro. Now, for the feds, they would add not only the murders that were already there, but they would add other murders as well, including the murder of Ralph Doles, the murder of Frank Marassa, and other high-end crimes. Big Dino was fucked. And in January of 2009, he would take his first proffer session with the federal government. He goes from being a street kid from Sicily to a member of Tommy Schatz's crew, to a murderer, to a racketeer, to a cop killer, to a stool pigeon. On January 2009, he would flip, and in March of 2012, Big Dino Calabro would be one of the chief witnesses for the federal government. He would testify not only against his mentor, Tommy Schatz, but other members of the Colombo crime family. He would outline years of service to that family, all the way to becoming a captain of his own crew. For his testimony, Big Dino Calabro, keep in mind, killed a cop. He got 11 years in federal prison and is currently somewhere in America living under an assumed name in America somewhere. I know I just repeated myself. But for other members of this, Compitello would, that's not Compitello, that's Compitello. He would cooperate and get 12 years in federal prison. He is also living somewhere in America. Tommy Schatz Gioeli got a long prison sentence and is due out in 2024. He is an old man and will return to the streets very soon. Joe Waverly was released in, I believe, 2019 and is on the streets. What he does now is unknown. I'm not going to get into his active status. Little Dino Saraceno would also get a long prison sentence. He would actually be acquitted of 3 murders, but the federal government would give him a 50-year prison sentence for taking part in the mafia and other crimes. He would say at one point to an FBI informer, 17 years. If I got that, I'd take it with a fucking smile. The feds didn't do that. They gave him 50 years. Little Dino Saraceno is currently at FCI Raybrook, and his projected release date is 2051, where he will be in his 70s. Dino Calabro, to me, is one of the most violent individuals, particularly from a farm team, that has ever been in the Mafia. A lot of these farm team guys don't end up making it to the big leagues. For Dino Calabro, he did. And if you know Brooklyn, you know New York, this guy was very feared. Some of these people on YouTube talk about Dino in these terms that he was a nobody. Dino Calabro was a feared motherfucker. And at the end of the day, just became a rat. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time here on the